The dark history of Mummy Brown. Imagine this. You're admiring a priceless work of art. Sunlight streams through a high window, illuminating delicate brush strokes and vibrant colors. You stand before a masterpiece. Then you learn the artist crafted that beauty with something more sinister than paint. He used the pigment of mummies. Suddenly, the canvas seems to darken. The colors lose their vibrancy. Can you still appreciate the art? Or does the knowledge of its creation taint it forever? Welcome to my channel. It's me. And today let's explore the dark origins of Mummy Brown. In the late 19th century, a Victorian gentleman sat at his easel mixing pigments on his palette. "A subtle earthy tone," he muttered, "is what I seek. My subject draped in linens must have a touch of permanence, a link to antiquity." Reaching for a small jar, he dipped his brush into a thick paste and traced the folds of the shrouded figure. That color, mummy brown, would tie the whole painting together, lending it a timeless quality. He believed he was using natural earth pigments, unaware that the mummy pigment contained something much different, the ground bones and flesh of the dead. To fully appreciate Mummy Brown, we must travel back to ancient Egypt, where the tradition of mummification arose. Ancient Egyptians believed in preserving the body for the afterlife. Through a complex process, they removed organs, dried the body, and wrapped it in layers of linen, creating mummies. But it was also during this process that their skin and sometimes bones were saved and used for a variety of purposes, including creating dyes. Ground bones mixed with animal fat created a rich brown pigment called Mummy Brown. Used by artists for millennia, it was highly prized because of its intense color and durability. For centuries, this pigment remained localized to Egypt. But the demand for rare dyes eventually reached Europe. During the Middle Ages, European merchants traveling along trade routes brought back not only spices and silks, but also mummy pigment. Its unique qualities intrigued artists, offering a new dimension to their creations. However, the connection between Mummy Brown and its macabre origin was never lost. Artists knew that their earthy hues came from the dead, a fact that added an eerie quality to their craft. As trade routes expanded and direct contact with Egypt grew, so did the demand for mummy pigment. European artists eagerly sought this exotic material, using it for everything from clothing to furniture. Its enduring nature and distinctive color made it invaluable. But the source of the dye presented both fascination and revulsion. While its rich history was acknowledged, the use of human remains was also seen as shocking and disturbing. Many questioned the morality of using human skin and bones as pigments, sparking debates that continue to this day. By the 17th century, Mummy Brown was widely used throughout Europe, particularly among artists specializing in still life and portraiture. Its warm tones and velvety texture lent an air of sophistication and timelessness to their works. Some artists, however, began experimenting with alternative pigments, driven by concerns about the ethics of using Mummy Brown or simply seeking new artistic challenges. This period also saw the rise of art movements that rejected traditional themes and techniques, often turning away from the use of exotic materials like Mummy Brown. Yet despite changing tastes and artistic revolutions, Mummy Brown retained its appeal, particularly for old masters who favored classic themes and traditional methods. But it was not only artists who used Mummy Brown. The pigment found its way into everyday items like wallpaper and textiles, adding a touch of elegance to homes across Europe. This widespread use contributed to the rapid depletion of mummy pigment, leading to both economic and ethical concerns about its sustainability. Because of its popularity, the use of Mummy Brown led to an unintended consequence. The increased demand for this pigment fueled the growth of the mummy trade, where grave robbers desecrated ancient Egyptian tombs to extract the desired skin and bones. This illicit activity resulted in the loss of countless artifacts and the disturbance of sacred burial sites. As the macabre origin of Mummy Brown became more widely known, public opinion began to turn against its use. Calls for alternative pigments grew louder, driven by a combination of aesthetic and ethical considerations. The rise of romantic and nationalist art movements in the 19th century further shifted the focus away from exotic themes and towards national identity, leading to a decline in the use of mummy brown. Yet even during this period, there were artists who continued to experiment with the pigment, drawn to its unique qualities and unafraid of its controversial reputation. Despite its enduring popularity, mummy brown gradually faded from use as new synthetic pigments became available and offered similar qualities without the macabre origins. This transition marked a significant shift in the art world and reflected broader societal changes in attitudes towards death and tradition. While mummy brown is no longer widely used, its legacy continues to fascinate. The pigment serves as a reminder of the intricate relationship between art, culture, and the macabre. Today, most mummy brown in museum collections came from 19th century artists. These pieces provide a window into a bygone era when the boundaries between art and death were blurred and exotic materials were highly prized. However, the use of mummy brown also raises important questions about cultural sensitivity and the ethics of displaying artifacts that may be considered sacred or offensive. The story of mummy brown began in the sands of Egypt, where the ancient practice of mummification gave rise to a unique pigment prized for its rich color and durability. Through trade routes, this pigment made its way to Europe, where it captivated the artistic community and found uses in various applications. But the source of the dye, human remains, always cast a shadow of darkness over its use, raising ethical questions and sparking debate. The popularity of mummy brown led to its widespread use throughout Europe, particularly during the 17th and 18th centuries when its unique qualities were highly sought after. However, this widespread use also contributed to the desecration of ancient Egyptian tombs and the loss of valuable artifacts. As awareness of the mummy trade grew, public sentiment shifted and calls for alternative pigments increased. The rise of new art movements in the 19th century further marginalized mummy brown, which eventually fell out of favor due to the availability of synthetic pigments. Today, mummy brown serves as a reminder of a time when the boundaries between art and death were less defined, and when exotic materials were highly prized. It also raises questions about cultural sensitivity and the ethics of displaying artifacts that may be considered sacred or offensive. But amidst the macabre origins and ethical dilemmas, mummy brown holds a place in art history as a testament to the human fascination with death and the relentless pursuit of beauty. What do you think? Would you still appreciate a masterpiece painted with mummy brown knowing its dark origins? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through time, please subscribe. Your support means the world to me. Together, we can keep exploring the captivating stories hidden within art. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful hues have the darkest roots. A disturbing side effect of popularity. When Egyptomania gripped Europe in the early 1800s, it wasn't just artifacts and art that became highly sought after. So too did human remains. In 1826, a British consul in Egypt estimated that around 1,000 mummies were smuggled out of the country every year. This led to a bizarre situation where Egyptian authorities would sometimes seize ships carrying stolen mummies and return them to their tombs. In the halls of the Louvre in Paris, under the watchful gaze of the Sphinx, the true horror of this dark trade was revealed. Visitors marveled not at the paintings and statues, but at the display of medical instruments and containers labeled ossements humains, human bones. The walls were covered in glass cases filled with fragments of skulls, femurs, ribs, vertebrae, even finger bones. Some were accompanied by detailed instructions on how to prepare them, while others boasted of their origin, such as the skull of a judge or the leg of a woman aged 32. The sight was enough to make even the most jaded visitor pale. The remains of over 300 individuals were crammed into the cramped room, and among them was a complete skeleton belonging to a woman estimated to be 40 years old at the time of her death. A label identified her simply as Egyptian. It was a grim reminder of the fate of those whose bodies had been stolen from their graves. Despite these efforts to raise awareness, the appetite for human remains seemed insatiable. French author Stendhal described a macabre scene he witnessed in Rome, where a group of children gathered around a tomb, attempting to chip away pieces of bone as souvenirs. As he watched, one of the children succeeded in breaking off a fragment of a fibula, which he proudly showed to his companions. All the while, the deceased within the tomb remained blissfully unaware of the disturbance. By the 1820s, mummies were no longer considered exotic or rare. They were commonplace, purchased and sold in markets alongside other everyday goods. It was easy to get swept up in the frenzy and fall prey to the misguided beliefs that fueled this morbid trade. Among them was the idea that consuming mummy powder could cure epilepsy. Legend held that the ancient Egyptians had discovered the secret to eternal life, and anyone who partook of their forbidden knowledge would gain the power to heal the sick. But in reality, these powders were not the key to immortality, but rather a mixture of animal remains, plaster, bone fragments, and other substances that had nothing to do with the mysteries of the afterlife. Nonetheless, people were willing to believe anything to escape the clutches of disease. Fueled by desperation and false hope, parents ground up the bones of their loved ones and mixed them with food or drink, hoping to ease their suffering. One Italian account from the 1700s tells the story of a family who unknowingly fed their child the remains of their recently deceased grandmother. The child survived, but the story served as a chilling reminder of the lengths people would go to in their quest for a cure. But not all was lost. There were some who dared to question the long-held beliefs and challenge the status quo. Dr. Giovanni Battista Grassi, an Italian physician, approached the subject with scientific rigor and conducted experiments to test the supposed benefits of mummy powder. His findings, published in 1816, were shocking. He concluded that far from being a source of healing, the powder contained traces of worms and other parasites that could cause harm instead of good. Despite facing ridicule and accusations of heresy, Grassi stood firm in his beliefs and continued to speak out against the use of mummy powder. His bravery paved the way for others to follow suit, and eventually led to the decline of this barbaric practice. Yet even as reason began to prevail, there were still those who clung to the hope that the dead could save the living. In the mountains of Switzerland and the villages of Germany, people continued to gather at executions, catching the blood of criminals in vials and mixing it with their drinks. They believed that by consuming the life essence of another, they could cure themselves of illnesses that plagued them. In their minds, it didn't matter how the individual died or the crimes they had committed, only that their life force could be harnessed and transformed into medicine. For these desperate souls, the scaffold became a place of healing, and the hangman's noose a symbol of hope. In the remote German village of Schongau, residents had a peculiar custom of collecting the blood of executed criminals. After the execution, the townspeople would rush to the scaffold and fill their hats with the condemned man's blood, which they then boiled over a fire to ensure it was fit for consumption. They believed that drinking this gruesome concoction could cure various ailments, including epilepsy and insanity. Some even paid the hangman directly for the privilege of gathering the blood, treating him as both executioner and healer. Despite the gruesome nature of their practice, the villagers were undeterred, believing that the risk was worth the potential reward. As the centuries passed, the demand for human remains only grew. The wealthy elite were eager to get their hands on mummy powder, which they believed could keep them young and healthy. They paid exorbitant prices for jars of supposedly pure mummy powder, unaware that they were often being sold fake products made from animal remains or plaster. In the grand palaces of Europe, people rubbed mummy powder on their skin or mixed it into their drinks, all in the name of beauty and vitality. But the obsession with the dead went beyond mere vanity. The infamous King Charles II of England was known to brew a bizarre elixir of life known as the King's Drops. This strange concoction was made with powdered human skull and was supposedly a key to the king's longevity. Despite the gruesome ingredients, the king was convinced of its benefits and dosed himself regularly. The story of Charles II serves as a reminder that even those in positions of power and privilege are not immune to the allure of the macabre. However, as the 18th century progressed, voices of reason began to emerge, challenging the long-held beliefs and practices surrounding mummy medicine. Leading the charge was the renowned German physician Samuel Thomas von Sommering, who dared to suggest that mummy powder was not a miracle cure, but a dangerous fraud. Sommering dissected mummies and analyzed their composition, revealing that far from being the key to immortality, they were merely preserved corpses riddled with parasites and disease. His findings shocked the medical community and the public alike, but also laid the foundation for a more rational approach to medicine. The legacy of mummy medicine continues to cast a long shadow over history, serving as a reminder of the lengths to which humanity will go in the pursuit of health and longevity. From the ancient Egyptians to the European elites, people have long been fascinated with the power of the dead. Whether through rituals, beliefs, or medical practices, the desire to harness the power of the afterlife has been a recurring theme throughout history. The story of mummy medicine is a tale of desperation, greed, and the relentless human search for answers in the face of death. It is a story that reminds us of the importance of critical thinking and the dangers of blindly following tradition or authority. So as we reflect on this morbid chapter of history, let us also remember the lessons it holds for us today. Let us strive to be like those brave few who dared to question the status quo and seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Let us also remember the victims of this dark trade, whose bodies were desecrated and exploited for the sake of profit or personal gain. May their stories serve as a reminder of the value and sanctity of human life. In the end, the story of mummy medicine is a cautionary tale, a warning of the dangers of unchecked greed and the allure of the unknown. It's a story that continues to fascinate and repulse us in equal measure, but one that ultimately reminds us of the importance of truth, reason, and respect for life in all its forms.